All right. So we're starting from the beginning here. All right, there we go. I got it. So thank you everybody for tuning in on a Friday evening. It is early November.
I think it's on.
Very excited to chat with you all for the next little bit. Just a reminder, none of you are that I know of part of the.
Did I click on him?
So you want to mute yourself. And Morrigan, if you could go through and just make sure everyone's muted, that'd be very helpful. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, my name is Alex Harper. I am the Education and Outreach Coordinator for Red Rock Audubon Society. I've been living in Las Vegas for about 8 years now, and I came out here as a biologist working on the renewable sites in the area, mostly solar facilities to start, and then I moved on into wind facilities in the region. I've worked in Utah and California as well, New Mexico, parts of Arizona, and a lot of the West. And so I've gotten to know the deserts pretty well. And my focus is going to be here on Southern Nevada. And I'm with, again, Red Rock Audubon Society. And I'll let you read this if you'd like. You know, every organization that has a vision or a mission should spell it out. And this is what we have spelled out here with Red Rock Audubon. And so we understand that the world is changing quite quickly. And what we do is we work together to identify areas in the Mojave Desert and Las Vegas that need our attention, especially when it comes to bird habitat or bird and human interactions. And we do a lot of outreach through tabling events, as well as hosting things like bio blitzes, so sort of general natural history in urban settings. And we do, of course, a lot of guided birding events where we go to local parks and we share with other people the gift that is time in nature and observation of birds. So that's primarily how we do, we approach our organization's public-facing events, which I don't think is terribly unusual for most Audubon chapters. In this presentation, I'm going to start off with our big picture, and then I like to zoom in. I love getting into the weeds, but I also love looking at that big, you know, big time, deep time, sort of 30,000 foot view. So we'll start with that big picture. We'll break into our habitats. We'll go through what I like to think of the biological calendar, and then we'll sort of look at some of the unique situations affecting the Mojave Desert and some small solutions, and where to view birds in the Las Vegas area. So many of you are tuning in the Great Basin Desert, somewhere maybe around Reno or other parts of the state. And for us in the Mojave, you can see in green there, that's where the Mojave Desert roughly lies, although I know that some of you in St. George may be aware that you basically have a Mojave Desert edge where you are right before you get to the Colorado Plateau. So, you know, it's good to get reacquainted with the desert and what defines it. Well, it's a biome that receives 10 inches or less in precipitation annually. The Great Basin gets a lot more precipitation than we do in the Mojave. We get about half or even less than half of the amount that the Great Basin does. We're a lot warmer in the wintertime. It's not nearly as cold in the Mojave as it is in the Great Basin, but it is very warm here in the summer. So a couple differences. The Sonoran to our south, where you have saguaro cacti, they get a lot more precipitation than we do over in the Sonoran. So we're one of the driest, and we have pretty cool winters, but not typically freezing. So when we're looking at bird movement over the year, and remember,
do you know how to cast her?
I need to, yeah.
I'm gonna just make sure we're all muted. Okay. We are looking at right here a flyway map, right? And so we have generally 4 different flyways in North America. Now, these are generalities, but you have a Pacific flyway, and the Pacific flyway will go in through the entire state of Nevada, but most of those birds are actually migrating down the coast, let's say between the west side of the Sierra and the coast of California, for example. We're not getting nearly as many here in Nevada. And within these flyways, you can think of there being smaller micro flyways, corridors, or areas where you have riparian areas like rivers or streams, mountain ranges. Those can be flyways within these larger flyways. So that's our sort of latitudinal and longitudinal dimension, right? But we also have elevational factors here to consider. And for us here in Las Vegas, we have a city that is at about 1,600 to 2,500 feet, depending on what part of the valley you're on. For me, I'm about 2,000 feet, but people closer to Red Rock Canyon might be at like 2,500 feet. So it all depends where in the valley you're at. If you were to go all the way to the very top of the toppest mountain, very close by, you'd actually run into snow right now. We had snow just the other day and probably yesterday up at the very top of Mount Charleston, which is just under 12,000 feet. So as you move up elevationally, you go through creosote, you go through Joshua tree and blackbrush before finding your pinyon juniper woodlands. You even get into some montane, so some aspens, ponderosa pine, white fir, limber pine, and then finally you get higher up and you start to run into exclusively bristlecone pines and common juniper before you reach tree line. So we actually have quite a lot here close to Las Vegas. This is going to be very similar if you're over in St. George and you're thinking of your habitats closer to like Bryce or Zion or some of your plateaus to the south. As you move up elevationally, you're going to run into different plant communities. And as you find different plant communities, you are going to run into different birds. For those in the Great Basin Desert tonight, you're going to have more sagebrush at a lower elevation. So kind of where we expect to see expanses of creosote here in the Mojave, it would be sort of like the Great Basin version being your sagebrush flats and rabbit brush flats. So let's get into it. What's our biological calendar? We don't exactly have, 4 distinct seasons in terms of bird diversity and bird movements, but you can sort of fit them in a little bit. And we'll talk about how different families of birds sort of migrate through our region. So we're first going to get our shorebirds coming down in late July and August and into September. So shorebirds are coming from the prairie pothole region, maybe our boreal forest or even the Arctic. And then coming in after them, we'll have another set of birds. So we'll get into those in just a moment. And before we do, I want to give an example of fall migration and what's sort of driving fall migration and our seasons in general. So let's imagine that it is September 21st, more or less, and it's the fall equinox. That's when you have the first day of fall, and your days are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Well, up in Alaska and northern Canada, you're going to have more days with less and less daylight more frequently as time goes on. So you're going to have less minutes. Maybe I should say that a little differently. You're going to lose more minutes of daylight as you leave and go past the fall equinox. So you'll lose 9 to 11 minutes up in the Arctic Circle right after the equinox, but only 1 to 2 minutes down in Texas and Florida, for example. So you have much more darkness up in the polar regions as fall goes along and into winter. And of course, where there's less light, there's less solar radiation. So it's going to be colder. Okay. So with that cold, you have higher pressure taking up that air mass. And so what happens is it squeezes to sort of go outwards, and it creates wind. And that wind in the fall is going to leave the polar regions and go southward towards the equator. So for birds in migration, they're typically going to migrate with those cold fronts, with those fall fronts. And as the fall goes on into winter, they get stronger and stronger and stronger and colder and colder and colder. So those birds are following these wind fronts. You can imagine these birds sort of going along down with these little icons of wind that I have. So some of those first birds, like I mentioned, will be your shorebirds. And the shorebirds actually are a order of birds and different families within that order. So that order includes thick-knees, jacanas, avocets, stilts, plovers, oyster catchers, your phalaropes, and your dowitchers and these sandpipers like you have here. You have American avocet and you have a killdeer. With shorebirds, it's always great to look at your bill size and your bill shape. You're looking at 4 species of shorebirds here that are all different sizes, and they have different foraging strategies. And your smallest ones, the least sandpipers here, they're going to be probing the shoreline around mud or sand. The killdeer is going to be running in open areas looking for things on the surface of, say, a mud flat or a lawn. Your dowitcher is going to be probing, and your avocet kind of is a jack of all trades that can wade out into the water and pick things off the surface. So all these shorebirds have different modes of capturing food. And you can tell a lot by what a shorebird feeds on by looking at its bill shape and its leg length. So they pass through, many of them are migrating at very high altitudes, up to 10,000 feet or more. And we're not really seeing them in the Mojave unless there's a flooded area like a lake bed, which we did have, and the tadpole shrimp come out and all the shorebirds might congregate there, or they might come to the Henderson Bird Viewing Preserve. But for the most part, they're so high overhead, we don't even recognize that they're here. They're just cruising down to, say, Baja and the Sea of Cortez, or down into Central America. After we start to see the first shorebirds, we should start looking out for insectivores. So our songbirds that are eating insects. These are birds that can follow the insect activity on their way south, and as long as it doesn't get too cold too quickly, they should have no issues. But they are some of the first songbirds to move through, and that makes sense because they're going after insects, and insect activity decreases with cold weather. So they're usually out by the end of September. Following those songbirds, you'll get raptors like American kestrels and sharp-shinned hawks, Cooper's hawks. They'll be migrating along with the warblers and the flycatchers, your vireos, those insectivores. Those other smaller birds of prey feed on birds, and so they're following the birds along too. After the insectivores leave, we start to go into what I think of as our last phase of land bird migration. So this is when we start to see more of our northern flickers. We start to see our white-crowned sparrows again around the 1st of October. We get yellow-rumped warblers, of course, and ruby-crowned kinglets. And those birds start to really show up along with, say, like dark-eyed juncos. And for us in Las Vegas, they then become part of our winter ecology, our winter avifauna and composition, where you expect those birds to be here up until mid-April or late April. So again, that would be your northern flicker, American robins, a couple hermit thrushes, a couple spotted towhees, plenty of juncos, masses of yellow-rumped warblers and white-crowned sparrows. And then, of course, a couple other things like the occasional golden-crowned sparrow or the occasional fox sparrow will come in and set up shop somewhere in Las Vegas. And now is, early November, and between now and late March or early March, we're kind of in winter time. And our songbirds have mostly settled in. They found wintering territories. Our birds of prey have mostly stopped moving through, but we might get some more harriers or red-tailed hawks, ferruginous hawks coming into the area as winter goes on. But for the most part, we are looking at what we're going to be seeing for the wintertime. So just a couple themes that I've listed here. At places like the Henderson Bird Viewing Preserve and Clark County Wetlands, or for you up in St. George, you have the Virgin River and probably a couple of wetlands where you go looking for waterfowl. We start to see more of our dabbling ducks and our diving ducks come down starting in the end of October and going into the wintertime. Populations tend to increase as winter goes on. That may have something to do with the hunting season. Places like Henderson Bird Viewing Preserve, there's no hunting. And so birds might be coming in from other areas like national wildlife refuges, like in Overton or Moapa, Muddy River, where there might be hunting. They're not going to get persecution there. So they actually end up there after being scared away. Or if it's a cold winter, if lakes in, say, Oregon or northern Utah freeze, or there's water becomes inaccessible in some way, we'll get more and more ducks. And we start to get more geese too. Now's the time that we get the first snow geese, the first cackling geese, the first white-fronted geese. And they'll continue to move in and out of the area, joining groups of Canada geese. Something really interesting has happened with the creation of Lake Mead, an artificial reservoir, one of the largest in the world. We have it here in Las Vegas. We depend on it. We use about 90% of our water is coming from Lake Mead, which of course is coming from the Colorado River. And something that we've done as well, changing this landscape, is we've accidentally added clams to and shellfish to Lake Mead and the Colorado River system. Now, that has mostly caused a lot of ecological issues, but it's always interesting when there's something that seems to work out in the benefit of some other species. So it's really unusual to get scoters inland. They're mostly a sea duck, but we do find that at Lake Mead and probably some other areas that have introduced clams and hard-shelled organisms, these other bivalves, we get actually long-tailed ducks and we get scoters. So we have two surf scoters and a black scoter. The black scoter is in the center there with its mouth open. You can sort of see that white cheek contrasting with a black cap. Whereas if you look to the left, you see that surf scoter. It has more of a little bit of white at the base of the bill, but doesn't extend all the way back, creating sort of this capped look like the black scoter has. We surprisingly, or at least surprisingly to most people, we get bald eagles in the wintertime at Lake Mead and Pahranagat National Wildlife Refuge. So they start to move through in decent numbers, and they're chasing fish. They're going after carp. They're going after striped bass that we have in Lake Mead. So they do take care of the fish stock in parts of Lake Mead. They're very efficient. We get mountain bluebirds, of course. They start to come down with some of those cold fronts. And mountain bluebirds like robins, the occasional berry thrush that we might get, Townsend solitaires, they move with these cold fronts. They're very tolerant of cold weather. They eat a lot of insects and invertebrates in the summer, but they can also take advantage of juniper berries. And so right now, a lot of these thrushes are feeding on juniper berries in the mountains, and they might come lower into the valley as time goes on. Now, up in the Spring Mountains or the Sheep Range, or maybe if you're in the higher elevations near Bryce Canyon or outside of Zion, certainly up near Lake Tahoe, you know that there are plenty of songbirds even at elevation. So when you get up to a place like Mount Charleston at 8 or 9 or even 10,000 feet, you'll still run into songbirds. And you get some of the hardier birds up there, things like the mountain chickadee. So the mountain chickadees are staying up there year round. They don't really migrate. They might move up and down the mountain a little bit with the weather. But something like a mountain chickadee has a lot of adaptations to survive in really rough weather. For one thing, right now, they're doing a lot of caching. They're collecting surplus foods and they're storing them in places, and they can remember where things are. Chickadees also are opportunistic and very resourceful. Some of them in northern populations of chickadees, so like boreal chickadees, black-capped chickadees, they've been seen feeding on carrion. So they'll even go after like dead deer if they can. So they'll be scavenging amongst the ravens, trying to get scraps of meat. So they're resourceful in that way. And they also have adaptations that I believe some of the kinglets and the brown creepers might also have. They have this ability to drop their body temperature at night down to about 86 degrees Fahrenheit, but their diurnal active body temperature is more around 107 degrees Fahrenheit. So they can oscillate maybe about 20 to 21 degrees Fahrenheit between day and night. You surely see them very active in the after or during the day, all times of the year, but they're very frenetic, moving around. They keep themselves really warm, but at night they cool down quite a bit and they're able to survive. So that's a remarkable adaptation that something like the mountain chickadee has. So our winter's moving on, our ducks have settled in, our gulls are starting to show up at Lake Mead. Like we look for things like Iceland gull and lesser blackback gull. Those birds are starting to show up a little bit more frequently at Lake Mead. So we're looking for birds like them. We've done a Christmas bird counts, and you know, we're done freezing down here in the mornings, going looking for birds, and we're ready for a change of pace. And we're looking forward to spring migration when all these colorful neotropical birds come back from South and Central America and Mexico and the Sonoran Desert. So let's say in March, we start to lose some of our waterfowl. They go up into Canada and Alaska again, just in time to find open water. It's the water up there is now open. Lakes and ponds are not frozen anymore, so they start to vacate. And we start to get some of our first songbirds in mid to late March, like hooded oriole, a couple western kingbirds, Lucy's warbler is one of our first birds to come back. And by April and May, we're starting to see a lot of songbirds start to move through. And in March and April, a lot of our urban birds in the valley, like at 1.5 or 2 or 3,000 feet, they've started to breed already. They've started to set up territory. So there's a lot going on in spring, especially in May. That's sort of that sweet spot when the shorebird diversity, the waterfowl diversity, and the songbird diversity is all kind of at their peak. And so we're really excited about early May down here. That's when people are running big days and seeing 150 to 170 species in a 1 day or 24 hours at that point. So here's some northern pintail taking off. They're migrating out. We start to see some of our shorebirds coming back from Central America. So we have our lesser yellowlegs, and they're moving through. And we have a range map on the right. You can see the blue, that's where the bird winters. The red is where the bird breeds. So they're up in that taiga, that boreal forest, that spruce forest with muskegs and bogs and grizzly bear. Well, they're going all the way back up into the Yukon and Alaska and parts of Canada to go breed, but they'll come back down in late August and September, as I mentioned before. These birds will stop by at some of our wetlands like Clark County Wetlands Park, and Overton, there's a reservoir called Bowman Reservoir. They'll move through. I don't know where they go, closer to Reno. I haven't been up there yet, but I'm sure there are plenty of wetlands up there to look for lesser yellowlegs. And we get all these other birds coming through. Our black-headed grosbeaks are coming back, and they're feeding on fruiting trees in the area, and they're heading up into all parts of the Western United States and Western Canada. They even show up in Alaska from time to time. So that's moving through spring. And then we're like, all right, migration was awesome. And I remember there's always this one day where all of a sudden it's summertime. It goes from pleasant in the mornings and like kind of warm in the afternoon or during the day, but all of a sudden it's hot. And bird activity in the valley drops big time. We start to see that, by 9 a.m., like you're dripping in sweat and the birds are way less active. So for us, the birds may be breeding several times in the valley. They've just got a really long period of time where they can have several broods. So you might have lesser goldfinch or northern mockingbirds. They're having like 3 or 4 successful clutches. And this is a great time to, settle in, maybe watch your birds from the window and crank the AC a little bit and just watch the birds as they're feeding the young and get to know the routines of your local urban birds. And I skipped ahead here a little bit. What I mean by summer being staggered elevationally is that, if we're at 2,000 feet here in Vegas, but Mount Charleston gets up to 12,000 feet, well, as you move up, you lose temperature value. So it can be 90 degrees here in Las Vegas, but it can be 70 degrees at 8,000 feet in Mount Charleston and the Spring Mountains. So that affects the time that the plants begin to leaf out, the insect activity begins, or maybe the snow is covering the ground and the birds aren't ready to breed until they can actually forage on the ground again. So there's a staggering of breeding activity as you move up. So in the valley, you might have birds breeding in March, but maybe it's not late April until the birds up in Mount Charleston are kind of at that same place in time. Maybe they're just getting started. So settle in, get to know your common urban birds like your northern mockingbird. Here we are really taking up, we're picking up the amount of time that we spend thinking about lesser goldfinches, because we know that it's possible to communicate with people about native plants by saying, if you plant native sunflowers, you're inviting in birds like the lesser goldfinch, which is one of our Audubon climate watch birds. So it allows people to have the ability to give back in community science by looking for birds like the lesser goldfinch, and they can participate in those studies that Audubon helps to put on. And this is a bird that people can become very familiar with, and you can create habitat for it by just adding a water dish and planting native sunflowers. And we have native sunflowers here. I'm sure there are plenty of native sunflowers wherever you're tuning in from. If you're in the Great Basin or the Colorado Plateau around Zion, you definitely have native plants that you can plant and bring in things like the lesser goldfinch. Up in the mountains, it's a lot cooler, but it can still be quite warm. And up there, we have many of our birds that are adapted to feeding on a type of cone from a coniferous tree. We have the Clark's nutcracker on the left-hand side. In our region, they're going after a lot of limber pine seeds and nuts. And your pygmy nuthatch here on the right might be going after ponderosa pine. So they'll take little bits off and they'll crack them open and they'll eat the seeds. We have red crossbills and even grosbeaks, and they're moving around the Spring Mountains right now, feeding on ponderosa crop. So up in the mountains, we have all these birds that are feeding on seeds that are produced by large trees. And after they eat them, they go disperse these seeds through defecation. Or maybe they just drop something, or something like a Stellage jay or a Clark's nutcracker will actually cache things. So they'll grab a seed and they'll plant it somewhere with the intent of going back and getting it. The memory's not perfect, so maybe they forget something, but they've also planted something in the process. So the health of a lot of our coniferous forest is tied to the health of our birds of the coniferous and mixed forests. So conservation of birds is conservation of plants. or conservation of these plants is conservation of these birds too. And with climate change, we are seeing less seed production from many of these plants, and that's affecting bird populations. And many of you might be familiar with the pinyon jay and efforts to monitor the pinyon jay populations throughout the Great Basin and the Mojave Desert, the entire range of the pinyon jay. So that's something that Great Basin Bird Observatory has been doing, and probably working with many people around your community to monitor them. They've created a survey that you can you can do yourself. You can sign up through Esri and download an app. What's one more app, right? Like, we all have tons of apps. Well, this is an easy one to get, and you type in your credentials, and all you need to do is go out to pinyon jay habitat, and you're ready to start surveying if you have pinyon jays, or pinyon jays food, the pinyon pine cone. This one's carrying off an entire cone in late August over here in the Spring Mountains. So this is the time that they're harvesting the fresh crops of these pine cones, and they are going to eat some of them, but they're also going to cache them and store them so that throughout the wintertime, they have stuff to eat. And in the meantime, they're also allowing the pinyon pine the ability to disperse as well, because they're also cultivating these pines at the same time. So that's sort of like the year of bird movement throughout the Mojave Desert or our adjacent regions. I'm sure it's quite similar in the Great Basin Desert, up in Reno, or wherever you are tuning in if you're at Lahontan, Audubon. I'd be curious to know at the end of this kind of like what the timing is like, if you see that birds are maybe a week difference in their timing, arriving or departing, as it is here in certain parts of the year, just to account for that distance and that temperature change. But I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that we all share in common regarding, hazards that birds run into. So we know that they're colliding with a lot of buildings, or their migration is disrupted by, ambient light or artificial light. Here in Las Vegas, we have one of the brightest skylines in the world, and that definitely interferes with bird migration. So we're thinking, what can we possibly do with these casinos to get them to diminish their light output? Are they willing to compromise and turn them off during migration when the most birds are moving through the dark night sky? Or, what can we do? Cats are still the #1 issue, and climate change, that's sort of the thing bearing down on us here in the Mojave for sure. So what can we do in terms of conservation? Well, one of the things that we can certainly do is keep in mind that birds are really going after water sources. As we have this drought, our drought is diminishing the amount of surface water sources that these birds can find. So if we're able to protect and preserve these riparian areas, oasis, even these little rest stops that have like a running drip fountain and a couple pine trees, they're attracting birds. How can we assist these birds along when they're not finding their needs met going through the desert? We have organizations like NDOW, and that's the Nevada Department of Wildlife, or the Friends of Nevada Wilderness here in our state. They put out bubblers or maintain areas like seed islands where they're basically creating some areas where they devote a lot of attention, where plants are able to survive maybe with irrigation and produce seeds, and then birds eat the seeds and fly off and defecate them and maybe redisperse these seeds from different generations. So that's interesting, and probably a very useful thing for us to keep in mind over the next few decades. I encourage you to plant more native or drought-tolerant species of shrubs and trees. Along those same lines, help identify important areas and corridors in your area, like what areas seem to be really important for bird movement. I have the feeling that the Spring Mountains is a very important place for birds to migrate through to find habitat or water. Like we have Deer Creek up there, and the springs that give the mountain range its namesake. All these springs that give birds water during migration. I'm about trying to find compromise. You know, I do empathize and sympathize with cat owners who have cats that are outdoors or sometimes outdoors, and that need and that sort of like I guess sort of this acceptance that it's okay to have cats outside, or that they're, you know, not causing any issues. I think most birders are aware of the issues that cats cause. And I definitely understand that it's a tough conversation to have, but I think it's worth telling people, hey, if you're going to have your cats outside, maybe start by keeping them inside a little more. Maybe do that in migration or baby bird season, or keep your cats indoors like first thing in the morning, and don't let them out until 10 a.m. when bird activity is way more diminished. Sometimes giving people like a little wiggle room is a good way to have them start another habit. And maybe they'll see that it's not so bad keeping their cat inside for longer and longer periods of time. Try it out and see if it works. Let me know. And help your Audubon chapters, help your Great Basin Bird Observatory. Like, we're doing as much as we can, and we are always trying to encourage people to pick up community and citizen sciences. And the more people that are doing it, the better. We have people from Southern Nevada Conservancy here. They might be doing some community science events too. So there are all these organizations that are always trying to do as much as they can, and the more people power around, the more people that can get stuff done. So you know, we have things like Christmas bird counts coming up, and I'll talk about them in a little bit. But all these things are really way more useful than you might imagine. If you're not familiar with Las Vegas, this is an urban oasis. This is a city or metropolitan area that exists because like somebody set up a railroad stop somewhere around Fremont Street, you know, like 120 years ago, and the city has taken off since then. And they set up a railroad stop there because there were a couple springs around where the Springs Preserve is right now. So we exist because of water below the surface and occasionally coming to the top. And if you want to find birds, look for the surface water. If you want to go to Floyd Lamb, Springs Preserve, or Lorenzi Park, Sunset Park, Cornerstone, Veterans Memorial Park, Henderson Bird Viewing Preserve, Lake Mead, Clark County Wetlands Park, Aliante Park, Corn Creek, you're gonna find water. So our birding locations are where there's surface water. Some of our other places like Pueblo Park, Winchester Dendero Cultural Center, or UNLV campus, those are other places that we find birds, not because they have surface water, but because they have old trees, or they have corridors, so areas where birds can move without being disrupted by something artificial, like they can just sort of move more naturally. If you would like to send me an email, you know, here are my email addresses. I prefer that you reach out to the Red Rock Audubon one. If you are going to reach out with questions, that's Alex Harper at redrockaudubon.com. My personal is alexkharper@gmail.com, but I answer both, but Red Rock Audubon is probably the one that makes the most sense. And we've got some Christmas bird counts coming up. We have some in Ash Meadows, Corn Creek, and Paranagit and Muddy River. Those are national wildlife refuge areas. So we're doing things in the national wildlife refuges. We have one in Henderson, so that's the southern part of our metropolitan area. That's going to be going on December 21st. Red Rock Canyon, So that's going to be most of our recreation area, and Spring Mountain Ranch, that's going to be after New Year's. And for you all up in St. George and Red Cliffs, you're not that far away from Muddy River. That's going to be kind of closer to Overton and a little bit outside of Mesquite. So if you don't have anything going on, then you can reach out to me via email, and I'll get you in touch with the CBC compiler and come on over and hang out with some of us Red Rock Audubon people and do that CBC with us. That'll be a lot of fun. So that wraps it up. We've got some time for questions, so I'm going to stop sharing. You can write something into the chat, or yeah, you can unmute yourself and yeah, ask me questions. I love questions that have to do with migration, or where to look for specific birds, or if maybe you have questions about the timing of some species, I'd love to know those things. So feel free to chime in. Nothing? Got no.
Oh no! Oh, sorry, I wasn't sure. I just unmuted myself. Hi,
Okay, what's up?
Drew from Lahontan Audubon. I did have a question about birds of prey that migrate through southern Nevada. Do you ever get golden eagles in southern Nevada, or no?
We do get golden eagles, yeah.
Okay.
So just sort of like raptors in general. For those of you that are familiar with the Goshoots up in northeastern Nevada, many of our birds of prey are trying to avoid that big, Great Salt Lake Basin in Utah. And so they sort of funnel to the west side of that big basin and go down the Goshoots. Many of our mountains in the state are oriented north-south already. And so birds are generally trying to move north-south, and they're kind of hopping along those islands of mountains, these tree islands, all the way south, and passing through here. I think we, in the fall, compared to the Goshoots, we're getting birds about a week later, birds of prey. Like we get more sharp-shinned hawks or Cooper's hawks about a week later than they do. And we get pretty much everything that they do up there, but we have way less goshawks. Less goshawks, but we have lots of accipiters and a couple golden eagles. It's nothing like the Great Basin Desert, but most of our mountain ranges have a couple.
Okay, that's good to know. Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, thanks for tuning in from Lahontan. Well, I will give it another minute or two to see if anyone has questions. If not, I will leave you to your Friday evening. Morrigan in the chat put some of our websites and links that we feel are helpful, some of those community science projects. GBBO's community science hub for pinion jays. And then we have Audubon's National Audubon Climate Watch, where we monitor things like nuthatches, bluebirds, spotted towhees, and of course, that urban and desert species, your lesser goldfinch. Cool. And there's Ned in the chat saying he appreciates the shout out. So you can reach out to that guy in the chat about some of the pinion jay study opportunities that they have going on. Other than that, I'll leave it there. I hope that this was helpful to you. I know that many of you coming in from Reno or St. George, I hope that as I talked about the stuff here at our latitude in Las Vegas and our elevation, that it was interesting to hear some of the parallels between when birds are moving through here versus when they're moving through your area. I can certainly say that lots of our ducks and our waterfowl, they're coming from Utah and what we call the prairie pothole region. So parts of Montana, Wyoming, the Dakotas, and northern Utah. That's where we're getting most of our waterfowl from. That's where they're born, and then they come down here. So it's cool to me that at least many of our birds are probably passing by St. George and the Virgin River on their way here. Who knows, maybe we're seeing some of the same birds just a couple days apart when we're coming from all these different parts of the Great Basin, the Mojave, and the Colorado Plateau. So I can go on all sorts of rabbit trails about bird movements. I'm happy that you've all stuck with me for the last 45 minutes, and hope to see you down here in Las Vegas or somewhere else in the desert. Have a good night, and if you're interested in getting this recording, it'll be up on our website, or email me and I can send it to you as well. So thank you so much, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. There'll be more of these in the future. We've got some bird of prey ID workshops and some birding by ear things coming up. So you can check out our calendar, and all are welcome. So
Nice.
yeah, cool. And good to meet you. What would you say your name was?
Drew.
Drew. Are you a service member, or?
I'm the Vista for Lahontan for this
Okay.
year.
Cool. Right on.
Hey, Alex, quick question.
What's up?
The Tennessee warbler, is that late or about normal if and when they're seen around here?
Well, it's hard for me to just answer a question without like giving way more of a preamble than necessary. So I'm going to give this a longer answer because I think the longer answer is interesting. There's a saying with some people out east, and that is that when they see the Tennessee warbler moving through, that fall migration is basically over. And what they mean by that is that the Tennessee warbler is one of the last songbirds to move through in that neotropical push of songbirds, right? Like they're not talking about palm or yellow-rumped warblers, but what they mean are those neotropical warblers. And so they're some of the last ones to move through the east where they normally migrate through, but they're also one of our later ones here on the West Coast when we're talking about birds that are a little off course. And so it makes sense that some of our late warbler rarities will be the Tennessee warbler. This is probably around the time that we get like the last of the Tennessee warblers. But that being said, I had two in the last few days. I had one on the 2nd up at Corn Creek, and then I had another one at UNLV with UNLV Audubon. So I had two back to back, and they're definitely two different birds. They're like 30 or 40 miles apart from one another. So they're probably some of the last ones are moving through now. That's a long answer, but I think that some of the stuff before it is applicable and interesting.
Yeah, no, very interesting. So are eastern vagrants generally going to run on the late side of migration?
There is a little bit of it seems to me that there's a connection. And I grew up in South Florida. I started birding in like the Miami area. So we're at a latitude of about 24 north. And I think here in Vegas, we're at like 30. And so if birds are just along the normal path, like an eastern bird going from Eastern Canada down the Atlantic or the Mississippi Flyway, by the time they get to Florida, let's say like a bay-breasted warbler, the peak there is October 14th. That's like the peak for them at that latitude. So they're showing up here in Vegas right now. There are at least two of them in the last few days. And they're showing up later over here than they would be over on their normal trajectory, because they're covering probably as much distance, but they're going west instead of south. And so they're covering that distance, and a bay-breasted in like a normal trajectory should be in like Central America or just touching down in South America. But these ones are showing up here now, same amount of distance more or less, but a way different trajectory, but similar timelines if you line them up. So there is a little bit of a lag here in the West for those rarities, I think.
We had a Tennessee warbler here about a month ago.
Oh yeah, over in St. George.
This is in St. George, yeah.
Yeah, I had one about a month and a half ago. So they will show up early too. And I know that in like mid-September, there was one in Washington State, but they're one of those interesting birds because they also breed in like British Columbia. So they're to the north of us, but they tend to bend around the Eastern Rockies and stay in the Great Plains and get towards the Gulf of Mexico in the fall. But some of them end up just going kind of maybe due south or something, or like go southwest from the eastern population. Nobody knows that type of stuff actually, like where these birds are coming from. But yeah, they seem to show up anytime in the fall. Yeah, and there's a bay-breasted warbler today at Floyd Lamb. There was another bay-breasted warbler in Prim like 2 or 3 days ago. And we have a tricolored blackbird hanging out in the southern part of the county. That's the easternmost record that anyone knows of for a tricolored blackbird. And it's almost in Arizona. It's on the Colorado River. All it has to do is fly like 200 feet to the east and it's in Arizona. And as far as I know, there are no records in Arizona. So if somebody wants to follow that blackbird from its feeding location in Nevada across the Colorado River, they'll find something in a state that's never been recorded before. So if you're really bored this weekend, you have a good chance.
We're on it.
You're on it? Yeah, cool. What do you have going on up in St. George?
It's really slowed down.
Yeah. Are you getting lots of flickers and robins coming to the ornamental plants around, and are the juncos showing up and white-crowned sparrows?
Yeah, lots of sparrows, good groups of robins, scads of yellow rumps, of course.
Yeah.
Meadowlarks.
Your fair. Yeah.
Meadowlarks seem to be congregating.
Oh, cool. Are you getting any geese, or like, is there a place in St. George where you get, the odd tundra swan around Thanksgiving or something like that? I know you have some golf courses up there and waterways.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are a lot of similarities between St. George and
There was a snow goose at a golf course about a week and a half ago.
Mm-hmm. Any buffleheads yet, or tough, or ringneck ducks or redheads?
Lots of ringnecks. Lots
Yeah.
of them.
Okay, cool. We're just starting to get more of our diving ducks. Like, we just had a canvas back, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, and the ringneck ducks have been back maybe about 2 weeks, not in huge numbers, but they're starting to come in. And it's fun to hang out at the Henderson Bird Viewing Preserve, where you all came down to visit a couple months ago. That location, early in the morning, you can see lots of ducks coming in and out. They seem to be actively migrating, just because they kind of come in from the distance. It's as if they've been migrating and they see this water and they touch down and they're super wary. And the peregrine falcons have figured out that there are lots of ducks around too, because it seems like there's always a peregrine around chasing the ducks and the shorebirds at Henderson. So it's such a fun time of year.
Canada geese here seem to be like the ones now are not migrants as far as I can tell. They're just kind of here all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't really have a lot of our Canada geese back yet. They definitely start to move through real soon. I don't know where from, but they definitely they have a presence at some places, and then they all end up congregating where people feed them. So that's always a event.
Yeah.
You go to a place and they're like 300 Canada geese chasing kids and dogs, and yeah, it's wild. like
There
Floyd
were
Lake?
about 20 cattle egret reported yesterday.
Whoa,
I don't know if that's unusual or not, but it was
Seems like it.
certainly noteworthy. Somebody was reporting it.
yeah, it seems like 20 is a lot, I think anywhere, any time of year in our region. That would definitely be a unusual amount here, but maybe the time of year isn't too off. I think there are usually a couple. Were they around a pond or in a field?
I believe they were in a field that also has horses and cows.
Hmm,
I believe that's the location.
okay. Yeah, that sounds,
And there was one on Sand Hollow Reservoir, just sitting on a red rock at the water line.
huh, yeah. Yep, sounds about right. We're starting to lose a lot of our snowy egrets, so I think things are starting to move south. Are you getting more like mountain bluebirds? Are there any early ferruginous or rough-legged hawk sightings up there yet? Or is it still a little too early? No, rough-legged's not really in the St. George area. You kind of have to get to Cedar City for them.
Yeah, I think I saw a report of maybe 2 ferruginous hawks in the area. I don't recall where.
Mhm. Okay, cool. Yeah, well, we have them over in Overton and Muddy River pretty frequently. So near Mesquite. Usually starting about now, we'll get a couple. They love those agricultural areas. You know,
Yeah.
usually a couple vermilion flycatchers and loads of mountain bluebirds in those areas too. Lots of blackbirds and occasionally we'll get rusty blackbird in those groups or in these agricultural areas between Vegas and Mesquite. So probably only an hour and a half from St. George. I'm talking like Overton area, if you know that. So good stuff over there. It's a good time of year. So hey, I'm gonna get going, but so good to see you, Paul, and everyone else that's stuck around. I don't know if you're just still around or if you've muted and turned the screen off and left the area. But thank you all for tuning in, and there'll be more of these coming down the pipeline. So keep an eye out. We've got a couple more Zoom presentations.
Thank you.
It's great. Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, totally.
Thank you so much.
Good night.
Sure. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Bye-bye. Good to see you, Paul.